The state federal prosecutors announced one of the biggest drug busts in New England history.
Over 200 pounds of suspected drugs, including some made to look like Valentine's Day candy, were found inside a home with children living inside. Authorities announced this historic seizure Monday morning in Boston. The haul containing several different types of drugs in staggering quantities. Millions of doses of raw methamphetamine, counterfeit Percocet pills, and counterfeit Adderall, and a rock-like substance with fentanyl, cocaine, and meth.
All told, there are more doses seized in this one house in Lynn than there are people in Massachusetts. And the street value is close to $8 million.
Acting U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts, Joshua Levy, detailing the scale of the massive bust. And as astounding as those numbers are, they're not the worst of it. In that seizure was a bag of 9.2 kilos of fentanyl, made to look like candy. On Wednesday, November 1st, federal investigators raided a home on the North Shore in Lynn after an investigation into an overdose death in Salem in July. That's when they found the drugs. They also seized 5 guns, scales, and packing materials. Authorities say the operation was being run out of a basement of the house, as children were living on the first and second floors.
Great police work rarely makes great headlines, but it does save lives. We're taking deadly narcotics off the streets.
3 men have been charged as members of a large-scale drug trafficking organization. According to a criminal complaint filed in the case, Emilio Garcia was the operation's ringleader. 2 others are charged in the case, Sebastian Behin and D.B. Felix. After the bust, state hazmat crews were called in to decontaminate the home due to the presence of several families and small children living inside.